There are three ways to learn to solve quadratics. The first one is factoring. The second way is to complete the square. The third way is the quadratic formula. And so today we are going to learn to complete the square. Listed in red are the steps to complete the square. In blue, let's look at an actual problem and do the steps as we go. Step number 1 says the leading coefficient has to equal 1. Our leading coefficient here is 1, so step 1 is good. Step 2 says to isolate x squared and x on the one side of the equation. Well, to do that, we have to move the constant, which is 4, to the other side. So that would give us x squared minus 12x equals negative 4. Now remember, you have to leave that space right there for just a second. Okay, step 3 says take half the coefficient of x, square it, and add it to both sides. The coefficient of x is 12. Half of 12 is 6, so we're going to add 6 squared to the left side, so we're going to add 6 squared, which is 36, to the right side. Okay, so now we've done step 3. Now we are supposed to write the trinomial, okay, here's our trinomial, as the square of a binomial. Okay, so the square root of x squared is x, the square root of 6 squared is 6, and your middle term is negative. Okay, so we have just written the trinomial as the square of a binomial. Equals, now we have 36 minus 4, which is 32. All right, so there was step 4. We wrote the trinomial as the square of a binomial. Okay, now we're going to solve this by taking the square root of both sides. So when we take the square root of x minus 6 quantity squared, we get x minus 6. When we take the square root of 32, you need to remember that we need to rationalize that. 32 breaks down into 2 times 16, and the square root of 16 is 4. So that gives us plus or minus 4 times the square root of 2. All right, now we need to isolate our x, and to do that we need to add 6 right here to make that go away. So we're going to add 6 to the other side. So we get x equals 6 plus or minus 4 times the square root of 2. Let's look at one more example of completing the square. The first step, remember, is that our leading coefficient has to be 1. In this case, our leading coefficient is 2. So we have to fix that. So in order to make that coefficient be 1, we need to divide everything in this equation by 2. When we do that, that's going to give us x squared plus 4x plus 7 equals 0. Okay, now our leading coefficient is 1, and we can continue with step 2, which is to isolate your x squared and your x term on one side, which means that the positive 7 must go to the other side. So that's going to leave us with x squared plus 4x equals negative 7. The next step would be to take half the coefficient of x, square it, and add it to both sides. The coefficient of x is 4. Half of 4 is 2. We're going to square it and add it to both sides. Now we're going to write the trinomial as the square of a binomial. The square root of x squared is x. Square root of 2 squared is 2. And our middle term is positive, so we have a plus. So there's a binomial squared, and that equals negative 3. Right, now we're going to solve by taking the square root of both sides. Okay, so that's going to give us, when we do that, that's going to give us x plus 2 equals plus or minus the square root of negative 3. Now remember, when you have a negative number underneath the radical like we do here, we have to pull it, it's imaginary, and we have to pull out an I. Okay, so we're going to have x plus 2 equals plus or minus I times the square root of 3. Now we need to solve for x, isolate it, so we're going to subtract 2. X equals negative 2 plus or minus I times the square root of 3.